Hi, can you see me and hear me? Excellent. Okay. I can't hear anyone though. I just want to make sure I can hear everybody as well. Can anyone unmute and speak?
Hello, Martine. Can you hear me?
Hi there. I can't hear anyone, so I just want to make sure my
Can
sound
you hear me now?
is okay.
Do you hear me now?
Can anybody unmute and just tell me or just speak so I can hear?
I am speaking. Can you hear?
Okay, I cannot hear anyone.
Okay.
So I just discovered that my volume was down. So that's probably why I couldn't hear anybody. Can
Can you
anybody
hear me now?
speak? I can hear you now. Oh my
Perfect.
gosh.
Okay.
I was panicking. I was like, I can't hear anybody.
No worries.
Okay, thank you so much.
So can you see the chat on the side of your screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Are you planning to share the slides on
No,
your end?
no, I'm not.
Okay. So I will share them on this end.
Excellent.
Um, you're just going to have to let me know when you want me to flick through them.
Excellent.
And you will see them in the same window you see the holding slides now. You
Okay.
will see your slides.
Okay,
So
excellent.
they'll throw to you from the podium, and then that camera feed will change to your slides.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
No worries.
And do you know how much time I have left? Are you guys on schedule?
They want everyone back in the room for 2 o'clock our time, so that's 5 minutes out.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Oops.
All right. Good afternoon again, everybody. We're shortly going to get started for this next session with Martine St. Louis. We have her now online, but I'll give you folks a moment to settle down. There are more cups for coffee and tea that have just arrived for those who are waiting, including myself. As you settle down, I'll just get started, being mindful of time. This session will last around 20 minutes. And then for those of you who aren't attending this session, it's just time for networking. Afterwards, we'll have a nutrition break between 2 and 2:40 p.m. before the next set of concurrent sessions starting at 2:45 p.m. So, starting the session with a land and labor acknowledgement, we just want to acknowledge that the lands on which Memorial University's campuses are situated are in the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups, and we acknowledge with respect the histories and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. We encourage everyone to reflect on the lands where you're located and the Indigenous peoples for whom these lands are traditional territories. And I think openly for me, these lands acknowledgements as an open reflection is just an expression of respect and recognition towards Indigenous peoples. Recognizing that I myself is an immigrant and a settler in this country, I also recognize that the Indigenous peoples have lived and cared for this land for thousands of years before we came along. We also acknowledge the egregious labor theft extracted from the people of African descent, used to build European wealth and economies globally and in the Canadian nation state, including Newfoundland and Labrador shipbuilding and cod fishery industries through the violence of transatlantic enslavement. We are committed to address institutional anti-Black racism and Black inclusion through Black people's leadership, and we pledge to keep the lights on to uplift the memories and spirits of those gone before us and others yet unfertilized for generations. Again, good afternoon. My name's Jay. I use he, him pronouns, and I am visiting from Vancouver, British Columbia, where I live, love, learn, and work in the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, and working with the people there, specifically at University of Canada West, a private institution in Vancouver. And I'm pleased to be here today as the moderator for this session. So again, thank you for joining us for this session, both in person and virtually, wherever these cameras are. And I would now like to take the opportunity to introduce our presenter, Martine St. Louis. Martine has been a federal public servant for 20 years. She's a modern public service leader who is preoccupied with translating policy into action. She's currently the director leading Canada's Black Justice Strategy, which is a top priority for the Department of Justice. The strategy is the federal government's response to address anti-Black racism and systematic discrimination that has led to the overrepresentation of Black people in the criminal justice system, including as victims of crime. The strategy will be informed by the diverse experiences of Black communities, including groups such as youth, women, newcomers, and others, and will aim to help ensure Black people have access to equal treatment and equal protection before and under the law in Canada. When she's not working, she values spending time with family and friends and finding creative ways to maintain connections. She enjoys Zumba and karaoke, and in the summer, spending time outdoors on the local walking and biking trails, boating, and getting the most out of each day. Welcome, Martine.
Oops. Hi, can everybody hear me? Is the
We can
sound
hear
okay?
you.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you for this wonderful introduction. I really do feel privileged to be with you all at this important conference that's happening today. This is an international equity, diversity, and inclusion and anti-racism conference, and it's truly, truly important to stop and take stock and learn about different initiatives that are happening across the country, locally, regionally, and here I am to present to you the initiative that me and my team have been working on. So again, my name is Martine St. Louis. I am a public servant who's currently working for the federal government. So that's with the Department of Justice. And I work within the policy sector. And the unit that I'm housed in is in the family law and youth justice. And I'm currently leading the Canada's Black Justice Strategy as the director for this initiative. So at our department, we have a number of equity, diversity, and inclusion tools, policy tools that have been developed. We have actually a dedicated unit that's called the Anti-Racism and Anti-Discrimination Secretariat that was established in November 2020. And they've been working profusely, looking inside the department, what can be done to address uh, things such as career development, representation, ensuring that we've got statistics and right data of what our population looks like at the department. And they've worked on an action plan and have profusely worked on implementing that action plan throughout the years. So there's that dedicated unit that really looks at the intersections of the subjects that you're discussing today, which is huge in terms of having a focus that acknowledges these important pieces. So in addition to that, in our department, we have policy tools, which include our gender-based analysis. So that's GBA plus, that's what we refer it to. It was legislated in 1995, but these are tools that we apply in our everyday policy work and as much as possible in our programs and services. We also have an anti-racism policy, which was also developed and effective this past year. So in March, it was launched. And we also have a Black-centric lens that was launched by a partner department. So that's the ESDC, so Employment Services Development Canada, and that was in February 2023. So we're cognizant of these different areas of focus that exist while we are advancing our initiative, which is about Canada's Black Justice Strategy. So sorry, I was talking to the second slide that I was just referring to. So if you could just move to the second slide. Yes. So basically, I'm just trying to explain that there's intersections of these different policies and tools that exist while we're really advancing substantive equality with this particular initiative that we're leading. So moving on to the next slide. So for Canada's Black Justice Strategy, I just wanted to give you a bit of background of like why did this come to existence? Why is this a priority? Why is this something that we're focusing on at this time? So as it was said earlier, this initiative is about developing a plan, a strategy to address anti-Black racism and systemic discrimination that has really led to the overrepresentation of Black people in the criminal justice system, including victims of crime. There are currently two groups that are overrepresented in the criminal justice system, and that is the Indigenous group, and then number two being Black people in the criminal justice system. There's been references where people have said racialized groups are overrepresented in the criminal justice system, but it's really two groups that are substantially overrepresented, and that's the two groups I just mentioned. When we refer to other groups, what we're talking about is other elements such as mental health and other situations such as that. And so in our department, we have two important strategies that are underway. One is the Indigenous Justice Strategy, and the other being Canada's Black Justice Strategy, which is the one that I am currently leading. So just to give you a bit of background, of why anti-Black racism is important and where it has been recognized is in the Court of Appeal cases in both Nova Scotia and Ontario. They recognize the reality that anti-Black racism and systemic discrimination in the criminal justice system, that it exists and that it does impact Black people in Canada. And we refer to Black people because we're not just looking at Black Canadians, we're looking at anybody who is Black in Canada and their experiences and how do we address this. So what happened is we had the United Nations in 2017. There was a working group that came to Canada and evaluated the situation about Black people in Canada. And they gave a report that really outlined what needs to be done or recommendations of how to address the issues that are being faced by Black people in Canada. So one of the recommendations was to develop Black justice strategy for Canada. So that was in 2017. and 2018, where action was taken and commitment was made that we're going to do something about this. And what happened is our Prime Minister, so Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, he basically mandated the Minister of Justice, so the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, to develop the strategy. And that was in December 2021. So my minister for the Department of Justice has been given this mandate, and to work on this mandate with the support of other departments. So one ministry, meaning the diversity and inclusion and persons with disabilities, as well as the Ministry for Public Safety, as well as making sure that we're in consultations with provinces and territories across Canada, as well as making sure that Black voices are reflected in this work. So working with Black communities across Canada. So basically this strategy, this commitment, this mandate responds to the report that was issued by the United Nations in 2017. While the strategy that we're working on is not necessarily an EDI initiative, because it's really looking at addressing the overrepresentation of Black people in the criminal justice system, there definitely is an influence there in terms of working with our colleagues and experts who are experts in the GBA plus, as well as the anti-Black racism policy lens. So they've been applied at every stage in the development of our strategy. And we're also making sure that we're reflecting the diverse background and experiences of Black Canadians in Canada, because it's different. It's different in Ontario, it's different in Quebec, it's different in Winnipeg, it's different in different areas of the country. So we've got to acknowledge that there isn't just this one Black experience in Canada. There's a diverse of experiences, whether it's Black people coming from Africa or who are born in Canada, or people from the Caribbean. There's definitely different experiences and different voices to reflect in this work. So going to the next slide. Okay. So in February 2023, an external steering group was striked. So basically, we wanted to make sure that we had a panel of experts who are of Black communities across Canada. And these were legal experts, as well as leaders in communities, Black communities across Canada. This steering group was established to really provide advice to the Government of Canada, really from an external perspective. Doing policy work, we can't initiate change or implement change without it being reflective of people's experiences and voices. In July, so with what we essentially did, and what I'm referring to now is the fact that we've taken key steps, I should say, to build the foundation for advancing this work. So we built an external steering group, or established an external steering group of experts. And then that steering group developed a framework which really was developed to guide the engagement and consultation work with communicating with Black communities across Canada. With the community-based organizations that we worked with, we contracted 12 community-based organizations to conduct the consultations with Black communities across Canada, and that took place in the fall of 2023. And we also produced a survey, an online survey, to be available on our Justice Canada website for those who can participate in any consultations, so that we could hear from other voices in case people couldn't participate. The purpose of the consultations was not necessarily to hear to do this from a starting from scratch point of view. We really wanted to, because we wanted to recognize that some populations in Canada have been over consulted versus other areas who have never been consulted. So we wanted to take stock of everything that we already know and go back and validate that information so that everybody felt included in this process. So that was our consultation process and approach. And the community-based organizations, what they did is they produced reports from the consultations, really detailing the outcomes of their consultations and sharing that information with the steering group. The external steering group took all that information, the consolidated, all the different site reports, and consolidated this into one report. We also had additional reports from other organizations that work with Black communities who contributed to this effort as well. And it all got consolidated into this one report. And that's what we're working on right now to make sure that it's published and released. And the plan is to release this report in June, so very, very soon. And we're really looking forward to that publication because we want to demonstrate progress. We made a commitment to this initiative that we're going to do this work. We consulted. We've recruited a panel of experts. We want to demonstrate that we're hearing the communities and that we're going to take action. So this final report is outlining recommendations to the government of what needs to be done to start this work for addressing the overrepresentation for Black people in the criminal justice system. So moving on to the next slide. So the framework really talked about or established 5 pillars, which I'll dive into a bit later. But basically, it really reflects what the areas of focus should be that are relevant to Black experiences with the criminal justice system and what needs to be done. So there were this framework really took stock of what we already know, what we've already heard, and also preparing us for the engagement exercise. And then there's also highlights that we indicated from the report that was established prior to this called the Discrimination Against Blacks in Nova Scotia. So we made sure to include the connection with the Royal Commission on the Donald Marshall prosecution. So that's from 1989 and forward. These 5 pillars were specifically chosen by the external steering group to reflect the most important areas that impact really anti-Black racism and what has resulted in the overrepresentation of Black people in the criminal justice system. So moving on to the next slide. So we've got five pillars. The first pillar being social determinants of justice. So really looking at, okay, what is the experience before people get Black people get caught up into the criminal justice system? My apologies. It's the setup sometimes that really impacts Black people being caught into the criminal justice system. So we're looking at, okay, what's the educational situation? What can be improved in that area? Looking at health and mental health, looking at employment income, as well as stable housing, as well as child welfare and immigration. What are the challenges there and what needs to be done to overcome this situation? So we're really looking at who are our partners as well to advance this work and looking at these initiatives. The next pillar is policing. And there's a public safety lens here that's truly important. So we're heavily working with our partners in the public safety portfolio of how can we start to address this work. So there's within the public safety realm, we've got 3 dedicated pillars here, and that would be the policing, as well as the corrections, as well as parole, reentry, and reintegration. So in terms of policing, we're looking at anti-Black racism training. What can be done in terms of representation and diversity, greater use of diversion programs, as well as community policing and mental health, and greater accountability. With courts and legislation, we're looking again at anti-Black racism training. We're looking at representation and diversity, affordable representation, legislative amendments, as well as greater use of diversions and IRCAs. So that's the impact race assessments tools that we've got implemented that we need to do more work around, as well as specialized courts. For the corrections and parole reentry reintegration, again, this is within the public safety portfolio, and we're looking at the anti-Black racism training, as well as representation and diversity, what Black specific programs or greater community engagement could look like, as well as Black specific, oh my goodness, I can't speak, Black specific supports for community reintegration. Again, looking at education and housing and employment supports. So once people are out of the criminal justice system, what is the setup for them to be successful and reenter externally life and be successful in life? So that we're looking at that as well as record suspension aids. So those are the 5 pillars. What's really interesting with these 5 pillars is a piece of this work falls within my department, so the Department of Justice. So that's the courts and legislation pillar. But the other areas fall outside of our legislation or our jurisdiction, I should say. So we're really working with other departments at the federal level. We're also working with provinces and territories to see what can be done in this respect. And then we're working with these partners because these other areas or these pillars fall into their areas of responsibility. So for instance, with policing, yes, we're providing recommendations. We're going to be the leader, the lead, I should say, in this work in terms of providing the information, making sure that everybody knows the recommendations. But in terms of policing, we can't actually impact change there. So that's why we're working very hard with our partners in these respective areas to address these changes and address the recommendations that are being proposed. So again, the recommendations are going to be outlined in the final report when it'll be released in June. And we'll continue the work with developing an action plan to respond to those recommendations. And we want to hold everybody accountable in this work. So there'll be steps and stages to make sure that we're reviewing, that we're monitoring the progress, and we want to keep the Black communities informed. We want to keep everybody informed with the progress of this work, because addressing this work not only makes a difference for Black communities in Canada, but it also impacts Canada overall. We want the rights to be respected for every human that's within our country. And essentially, this initiative doesn't only affect these targeted or specific communities, it affects all of Canada and our country. So that's the initiative that I came to give you more information about. I can certainly turn to the next slide. We'll turn to the next slide, which is really opening up an opportunity for questions if there's time.
There's definitely time. Thank you, Martine.
Okay.
So thank you for sharing again your experiences and your insights with us. As I mentioned, we'll have the space now for question and answers. For the folks in the room, we'll have the microphone as well. And for those online, Kira is monitoring the questions, so you can just share it on there. And we'd love to hear any questions from you. Any questions? I see one at the back.
It's all about consultation. So let's say that somebody who's interested in or fell into a problem, is there some kind of a network that they can connect to and ask the legal situation?
Oops. Yes. Thank you for your question. And I just want to get more clarification. So you're saying, let's say somebody is in a situation who they should reach out to? Sorry, I just want to get clarity.
Yes, exactly. Is there any kind of, I don't know, lawyers who would work for free to provide some kind of consultation?
There's definitely legal aid that exists. You can certainly go to our website for Justice Canada. There's definitely a site that's dedicated to legal aid that could provide more information. And please note that I'm working at the federal level, so if you're looking at specific services in your area, then we're looking at either provincial level or municipal level. But you can certainly reference the information that's available on our site that could guide you to specific contacts that could lead you to the right person. And there's also great information available there, guidance and tools as well. So that's what I can point you as the first step. And I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
It does. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? One over there back.
Yes, hi there. I was just wondering if the two groups that you mentioned were Indigenous peoples and Black people in Canada. Is there a similar initiative for Indigenous people happening parallel or with the same mandates from the federal government to do a framework addressing Indigenous people as well?
Yes, so in our department, we have a dedicated unit that's really working with Indigenous federal institutions as well to advance this work. So there is a team that's dedicated to developing an Indigenous justice strategy. And they've been doing consultations for quite some time, but they're advancing the strategy as well this year. So we hope to see more information that comes out. And again, this information is available on our website for Justice Canada, and you can definitely learn about the progress in with that work. I know that they've recently released a report of what we heard from their consultations as a first phase of their work. So there's a lot of information that's available. So I would recommend that you consult that information. Does that answer your question?
Thank you for that question. We've got time for one more question. Very back.
Hi, my name is Regine King, and I have a two for one question. So I'm going to ask them both. I understand it's a great initiative that is happening at the federal level, but I am also mindful that many of the lawyers at the federal level are white, middle-aged, or older men who are the gatekeepers. I'm saying this because I experienced it in one session when I was part of the public safety at the federal level, where those very lawyers were saying that we don't have that information because we don't have Black lawyers. So where the issue of representation is very key, but also people who understand the issues Black people face in Canada. So is there anything that is changing at that point, or is this Canada's Black justice still working based on people like you who can also be tokenized, but not really impact the change, especially when it comes to holding accountable people at the federal level who make many of those policies and the laws. So my second question is, when it comes to policing, and here I'm not talking about only the police, I'm thinking of what now is known as school to prison pipeline, where everyone is policing little kids, from their kindergarten teachers to store managers and everyone else controlling the Black population in Canada. Does the framework being developed include any kind of levels of accountability where anti-Black racism may be very pervasive? Thank you.
That's an excellent question. I wish I could be there to see all of you. Thank you. Thank you so much for raising that and for sharing your experience as well. This is a huge initiative, the strategy that we're putting in place. Our goal is to influence, obviously, and work with our partners, develop this action plan where everybody will be part of advancing this work and will be accountable for delivering on this work. It's not an initiative that can change everything overnight. It's going to take time, and it's going to be phased phased approach with the implementation of this. But what is impressive to see is the dedication and commitment that's been made at the federal level. I'm seeing a lot of engagement, a lot of desire to implement the change from all of the collaboration and the consultations that we've been having. In the report, when it's released in June, you will see a lot of recommendations that are around this very issue of basically the school to prison pipeline and what needs to be addressed for that. The report explains the situation in Canada, the history, how we got to this place, and really tries to, or doesn't even try, it does, in terms of elaborating what needs to be done because of all of these systemic issues that have existed for a long time. There has been progress, but there's still so much more that has to be done. You know, and I agree with you with the representation. That is a common theme throughout all of the pillars that we've identified, that representation is important. And there's recommendations under each pillar of how to get representation, whether it's to have somebody influence the situation in the education system, whether it's to influence the courts situation so that people are paired up with support, the right supports, such as the IRCAs, which is the Impact, Race, and Culture Assessment. But there's still more to be done. So that's what we're fighting for. We're really working hard to make sure that this strategy is developed, that the recommendations are clearly communicated to everyone so that everybody's aware, and to be part of the solution with the development of this action plan. Again, we're looking at all these partners to be advancing the work type of thing. But we also want communities to speak up as well, because that's how we can influence or advance change. So by talking to your MP, speaking to your local politicians in your area, speaking up and raising these concerns. This is how issues get elevated and as a result get communicated, internally to the government to really influence change type of thing. So I'm not sure if I've answered your question, but definitely this is laid out. These issues that you've raised are laid out in the recommendations. And our goal is for the action plan to be laid out to respond to these recommendations.
Martine, thank you again so much for your time and for sharing your experiences.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It was an honor to be here with all of you.
And for everyone else, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Again, I'd encourage you to please complete the post-session survey, and a QR code will be displayed shortly. Our next concurrent sessions will begin at 2:45, and they are in the following rooms: Policy, Research, and Ethics in B 2007A, Education and Training in B 2007, another Education and Training B 1004, and Building Community B 1003. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy.